Welcome back to The New American. I'm Bill Jasper, and I have here a special guest who I just met today, Dr. Truyet Mai, and he is a chemist, professor of chemistry from Vietnam, actually, but trained in France at University of Mekong, and also other universities, and has taught at various universities. And his presentation today to the Vietnamese American Senior Association here in Spokane, Washington, he dealt with two issues that are very important. One that might seem kind of very distant to most Americans, about the Mekong River Delta, and the second one about fluoridation. So we're going to ask him, and he's an expert on both of these issues, and so we're going to dive into this and get his very important take on both of these major issues. So, Dr. Mai, so pleased to have you here today.
My pleasure.
And you gave a very interesting presentation on the Mekong River and the Mekong River Delta and the influence, the bad influence that China is having on the Mekong River. And so I thought a number of points that you brought up there, we might not have time to go into all the detail that you did, but tell our viewers why the Mekong River is important, not only for Vietnam, because most people associate it just with Vietnam, but also what is China's role in it?
Yes, first of all, I would say that the Mekong River is very important, especially for the South Vietnam, which has a field of about 39,000 kilometers of rice agriculture.
39,000 square kilometers
yes.
of rice production.
Yes, rice production in South Vietnam. So,
and so where does that put it in terms of global rice production?
Yes, so from this we can provide enough rice for the whole country and export to the world, yearly from 6 to 7 million tons of rice.
6 to 7 million tons.
Yes. And before 1975, we get one season of rice, but we still have enough rice. After 1975, under communist regime, they tried to exploit more land. So instead of one season, they create 3 seasons.
So before the communists took over in 1975,
yes,
you only had one season of planting rice.
Yes.
But you had enough to feed the country,
more than
plus,
enough. Yes.
And plus exports.
Yes.
But after they came over, they made
they
3
tried to
seasons.
exhaust, and the reason why they tried to develop more and get more rice by creating the cover dive to reserve, to keep the water from Mekong River for the season the dry season, I mean. And by doing this, they try to put in more fertilizer, the more herbicide, pesticide, from which the quality of the rice become right, and yearly, by year, by stocking of the fertilizer, the land become deserted, and they try to add in more fertilizer to keep the same production.
So they triple the amount of land.
Yes.
They increase the fertilizer and everything,
Exactly.
and yet production is going down.
But the problem now is because of the building of more hydropower on the mainstream of the Mekong River.
North.
From north, from
in
China, in Laos, in Cambodia, most provided by Communist China funding.
So they had the dams in China, but then the ones in Laos and
Yes,
Cambodia
yeah.
were built
Right
by
now,
the Communist Chinese. As
they
well.
have a more power projected and the south of Cambodia, and one is just south of borderline. They start of building since last year, and they know they will inaugurate by 2025. I hope at this time the situation become worse and worse, and because they direct all the water to the Tonle Sap, they skip on it, and the flow will reduce less and less.
So the Chinese, with their dams, are taking the water,
Yeah.
and in your presentation you gave some pretty impressive figures about the decrease. It went from
Cambodia.
But the reduction in water flow
Reduction of
per
water, and the season from from spring is completely destroyed. Since the 1919 until 2023 right now, yearly about 200,000 hectares is completely destroyed by this season because they don't have enough water coming in to the rice.
And you talked about the flow rate reducing
flow rate,
from,
yes.
what was it, 39,000
Yes.
cubic
Before
feet
1975, during the wet season, we supposed to receive, we just in the Delta Mekong River, receive 36,000 cubic meters per second. And
36,000 cubic meters per
Per
second
second,
in the Mekong.
yes.
Well, Mekong is a huge river.
yeah,
And so,
still.
but then it reduced to,
Really, right now it's reduced to less than 1,000 during the wet season. But I'm talking about the dry season. It's come from December through March. And normally before we receive about 9,000 cubic meters per second. But right now, since 2019, it reduced from 500 to 300 cubic meters per second.
Wow.
That's the reason we don't have enough water to feed for the season.
from 9,000 cubic meters per
yes.
second down to 300.
300. Especially in 2020, it dropped to 150.
So you have a lot of dry riverbed.
Yeah. The plant, the rice, is
The
completely
fish.
destroyed.
The fish.
Destroyed. Yeah, the fish, of course.
Yeah.
No water. How
Yeah.
do you expect to get fish?
Sure. So this sounds like typical communist central planning. Particularly, it sounds like Mao's Great Leap Forward, where they had all these grandiose plans. Mao Zedong said, we're going to plant all this grain, and they completely irrigated areas they shouldn't have, that brought the alkali up. They
Yeah.
totally devastated everything, and it ended up in
Exactly.
starvation.
To me, the communist China is the main cause of this issue. They took out from the Mekong River Committee, they took out from Mekong River Commission. They tried to put their own cooperation to control everything in Southeast Asia. Hopefully, the convention, United Nations Convention 1975, can save us to control and get Communist China coming back to follow the law.
Well, that is a big order, because China has
Yeah.
focused a great deal. We've written about it a lot in the New American Magazine for the past 10 years on gaining control of more and more for the World Health Organization, the Food and Agricultural
Yeah.
Organization, UNICEF, all of these things. They put their people in top positions, and they are very adept at using the United Nations.
Yes.
So that's going to be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you something. according to the common law for United Nations, we supposed to have one station just south of borderline of China and Laos, and 2 stations in Tian River and Hao River, because we're flowing to South Vietnam is split 2 branches. We have 2 stations. And according to the convention in 1997 too, we, Vietnamese and Chinese over there, supposed to report the data from 3 stations. These data are physical data like pH, turbidity, and dissolved oxygen to control the fish. You know, if the DO is less than 3 milligram per liter, the fish cannot flow, and especially the flow. But Vietnam keep reporting everything on the weekly basis, but the Chinese, they never tell us, especially for the flow. They completely control the flow. The most them just the borderline of Vietnam and Laos, that's called a Dinh Hong Dam. This one is completely controlled by Chinese, and they keep the water and divert the water to North Thailand because they connect together.
So China has largely control over Laos and Cambodia.
Yeah.
And they have a big influence in Thailand. Now, China and Vietnam have traditionally been rivals and even enemies through 1,000 years or more. But they're both communist countries. And so, despite both being communist, there is still a rivalry between them.
Yes. That's the reason I condemn them as a neo-aggressor. And they try to totally control the Mekong flow, to control the Vietnamese economy. And why the whole world keep quiet about this? Why? This is my question. Because United Nations right now, they don't have any power to implement any law to any country. Look at Russia right now. They invade Ukraine.
Well, if you look at one of the biggest things right now is the so-called climate change treaty, the Paris Accord. And China was one of the big promoters of that because it would put restrictions on us, which our politicians would force us to bear, as President Biden is doing. But China isn't required to do anything on that, and the United Nations doesn't do anything against them. So they're still treated very nicely at the UN.
Yes. My question is, why United Nations don't have any power to asking the Chinese government to follow the common law?
Well, yes. So I've written about that extensively, and you probably would need to dive into something like my book, Global Tyranny, to see why I would say looking to the United Nations not only will be ineffective, but if the United Nations did have power to enforce international law, that would be a bad thing as well, because the United Nations is essentially a lawless organization.
Exactly.
And from the very beginning, the Charter of the United Nations was written by Soviet agent Alger Hiss in our government and by his Soviet counterpart. So it was a pro-communist organization from the beginning, and at the founding conference in San Francisco, Alger Hiss, the communist Soviet agent, was the Secretary General, and he put all of his fellow comrades into the various places there.
Right.
And so from the very beginning, it has been a fatally compromised institution. And now, with both Russia and China, with all of their influence in the UN, and the way in which China has and Russia have compromised all for decades now the so-called non-aligned nations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. There is very little hope of getting any kind of justice from any UN
They
organization.
don't care.
Yeah.
Because they have their own power.
Yes.